So let's start by maybe just getting, I was gonna say a show of hands, but in the chat, if you have some houseplants, what houseplants do you currently have? And that will help me kind of assess what everyone's working with and what we should cover. I mean, I have an itinerary. I'm planning to cover the basics of plant care, watering them, sunlight, temperature, placement in the home, and then we'll talk about cloning your plants, aka propagation, and how you can make little cuttings into a new plant. An African violet, monstera, hibiscus and orchids. Hey Francis, good to see you. Great photographer out of Chicago. I actually need to look up African violet because that is not something I'm familiar with. Oh, what a beautiful plant. Succulents, great. You know, bonsai trees are tough, and actually it's not so much that the bonsai plant itself is hard. A lot of times it's the pot that it comes in. A lot of times to be sold at the store, they're just trying to create something cute. So they put it in a pot that doesn't have any drainage, which then leads to root rot, or they have rocks that are kind of glued on, again, just for aesthetics, but then when it comes to watering the plant, it makes it difficult for it to get proper aeration and all of that. A spider plant. Yes, I have a spider plant too. It does well inside or outside. Mine's actually outside. I debated bringing it inside for this, but it's just a little too dusty, a little too grimy. Lavender. Lavender is a really difficult plant to grow in a pot because it gets overwatered really easily. It's quite sensitive. If you put it like in the ground soil, it's so easy. It does well with full sun. It's fairly drought resistant, but in a pot setting, it's just so sensitive that it's kind of difficult to grow indoors, especially if it doesn't have proper drainage or sunlight. Bawinga and she feels my pain. Both of us have tried our hand at growing lavender because it's so lovely and useful, but no luck for either of us. So plants and pets, I don't have any experience with that, unfortunately, but I do know out of all the houseplants, the ZZ is among the most toxic for consumption. So if you have plants that you're planning to have within reach of a pet, ZZ is not one you want on your list. Plants that I recommend getting, we'll go over that. I think a really great place to start, there was this study from NASA where they went over a list of plants that help purify your air. So if you Google it, it comes up in like Lifehacker and a number of blogs. The study itself is pretty old, I think 70s or so, but a lot of the information still really relevant. There was a TED Talk from a man in India who talked about how if we were in a bubble, and this is important for India because they have a lot of manufacturing and such, so there's a lot of air pollution, but he's like, if everyone had 6 to 8 plants about chest height or taller, and you were in a biodome, those plants would produce enough oxygen for you to live. So that's something fun to keep in mind. Snake plants, super easy plant to have. It is prone to root rot if it's overwatered. Like the snake plant's one of those plants where everyone always says it's low maintenance, and that's true because you can forget about it for 2 to 3 weeks at a time. It needs very little water, very little care, and relative to other plants, it needs little light. It's a great plant for your bedroom because it's low light, and also most plants produce oxygen during the day. The snake plant actually produces oxygen at night, which is great because that's when you're sleeping, getting your beauty rest. So that's a fun fact about snake plants. And they're also easy to propagate. So we just kind of ran over the list of plants that you have going on, plants that you are interested in. Let's start with how to take care of your plants. I'm going to focus on kind of indoor foliage, like the ones that I've got here, where they're kind of leafy, kind of bushy. Succulents are not part of this category. Succulents are just full sun, little water, high drainage. So what I mean by drainage is you would want to make sure you have a pot with holes in the bottom. You need cactus soil or fast draining soil. So if you go to Home Depot, gardening store, they tend to have different bags of soil for different types of plants. Most indoor plants, kind of the same type of soil. Cacti, succulents, they have another variety of soil where it's the water just kind of runs through it really quickly because it's prone to root rot. So just think in the desert, they go long periods without water and then there's like a flash flood and that's it. So that's why you need quick draining soil for succulents. So for a healthy collection of plants, there are 3 key essential elements: sun, water, and temperature. So for sun, most houseplants are originally tropical in nature. And in the rainforest, there's high amounts of sun, but it's also kind of shaded because there are other plants, blocking it. You don't want direct sun. Direct sun means it's sitting out there like baking, no shade. But full sun or a lot of light for an indoor plant means it's in a shaded area, but there's maybe blinds diffusing the light, or the sun isn't shining directly on the leaf. It's just a brightly lit room. Does that kind of make sense? For indoor plants, when you're looking and they say, high amount of light versus low amount of light, a low light plant means that it still needs some light. So if you have a bathroom that doesn't have any light in it, you could get away with something like a peace lily or a snake plant, but you'll probably need to have 2 and rotate it every week or so that it has enough sunlight to kind of nourish itself. And then water, how often to water your plants? I get this question all the time, and I have to write like a mini essay because there's not really a one size fits all. I don't know about growing an albino monstera from seed because I haven't done it personally. I tend to work with cuttings for monsteras, so I wouldn't know, unfortunately, how easy or difficult it is. But if someone in the chat knows about growing a monstera from seeds, please share with Lady Guac Guac. Oh, I would love to have an albino monstera, but I just have, the classic. Back to watering your plants. The reason why it's not a straightforward answer is because there's a number of varieties. So earlier I talked about soil. Soil really affects how often you need to water something. So if you have a good mix of regular, indoor plant soil and maybe they put a little cactus soil in it, then it will drain quickly, meaning you'll have to water it more often. If it's a tightly packed soil, then it will hold on to more water, so that means less frequent waterings. It can be the same plant even, but just a slightly different room or different apartment, and it changes things. So for reference, all these plants, or most of these plants I had in my previous apartment in Chinatown, which is closer to East LA, the east side. It's a little bit drier there. That apartment was sunnier. I was on the top floor, so we had great light there. This apartment, I have great light, but only in the beginning of the day, in the morning, and by noon, my apartment's fairly shaded. And so when I first moved here, almost all of my plants were being overwatered because they didn't dry out the same way that they did at my last apartment. And I even saw like a little bit of mold starting to grow, and I freaked out and almost killed one of my plants, which I'll show you later. But you really just have to, it's a little bit of trial and error. But sometimes it helps to just touch your soil if you're not sure. What I'll do is I'll literally just put my hand at the top inch of soil and feel if it's dry or not. So top layer is kind of a good gauge, but like even better is like an inch under the soil, and you'll know if there's still water in the plant or not. Yes, oh my gosh, Busta is on it. It is a combination of light, humidity, potting mix, plant type equals how much water. So that's what I mean when I feel like it's a little bit of an essay when people ask. The type of drainage also really matters. So most of my pots will have a hole in the bottom so that they can drain when I water them. Some pots, that are really just to be cute, So like this one, for example, no drainage. So when I water it, I err on the side of less water so that it doesn't get sick. I saw a comment earlier about bugs, and if you overwater your plants, it becomes a great nest egg for gnats. So I mentioned overwatering earlier with one of my plants. Not only did it cause a little bit of mold, I noticed there were a couple gnats flying in my apartment. Not a lot, but there was always just like one lingering in the corner. So I took that plant outside to let it dry and gnats be gone. But I forgot about it and it got sun damage, but we'll get into that. So how do you clean leaves of dust? So just take a cloth, a rag, anything, even a paper towel, but in the interest of being eco-friendly, maybe use a reusable rag, old t-shirt that you're gonna throw in the wash anyways. Just wet it, dampen it, and just gently brush up against your leaves. And that will help keep them clean so they can absorb more sunlight and do more photosynthesis. On the topic of drainage, most of my pots, if they don't have holes in the ceramic pot itself, I will keep a liner pot that does have drainage. So if I already mentioned, I know this plant already doesn't have drainage overall, so I don't water it generously. I tend to be kind of sparing with it. But if I accidentally go overboard, I will just pull this up out of here and then pour the excess water into the sink or drain or whatever. I think a good thing to do when you're shopping for a watering can, this is like the standard IKEA one. I think it's $1. This I've used for larger plants or outdoor plants, but I hate it for my indoor plants because the spout is so massive, it's really easy to overwater. So for smaller plants, your indoor plants, if you're a beginner, highly recommend getting something with a tiny spout. See how tiny that is? Little teapot. And with the tiny spout, you can actually do a nice little circle around your plant. Some plants it's 1 circle, some plants it's 2. If you're not sure, you just got a new baby, start light-handed. You can always add more water later. Yes, gooseneck kettle for coffee also works great for small plants. Same idea, it's just underwatering is always better than overwatering. Because it's a little hard to nurse your plants back to life once they have root rot, but I'll cover how to do that. You can also put rocks at the bottom of the pot so that if there is excess water, the roots at least are out of the mush. If I had to estimate how often you water your plants, rough window, and it's actually quite large, but 5 to 10 days generally for most houseplants is like the window. Some plants, if you have a really sunny place and there's a strong breeze, then yes, it'll dry out a little bit quicker. So maybe 3 days. Like my peace lily is thirsty fairly often. This plant is always thirsty. So I'll water her a little bit more than my other ones. But most of my plants are kind of on a weekly schedule because it's easier to remember. If I was trying to be the perfect plant parent, I would maybe be like this one 5 days, this one 10, whatever. But I'm like, Sundays, it works for me. And then temperature and climate and humidity. That's all one category. Like what kind of environment are your plants in? So temperature wise, if your apartment is comfortable for you, it's probably comfortable for your plants. But humidity is something that really does affect houseplants. Most of them, like I said, are kind of more tropical in nature, so that they thrive in humidity. If you have a bathroom with a window and sunlight, it will do great because all that humidity from your shower will just like be a nice little jungle. So a lot of times when I have friends with dying plants, I'm like, just stick it in your bathroom and like watch it come back to life. Saving a plant from root rot, propagation. Propagation means to clone a plant, and it's a great technique to save a sick plant or just clone a plant so you have more for yourself and friends. This plant here is a dumb cane. A friend of mine moved to New York and asked me to hold on to it for her because she plans to move back to LA in a couple years. So I have the job of holding on to this plant for 2 years until she gets back. About a week or 2 after she gave it to me, I noticed it wasn't doing so well. The leaves were kind of yellowing. So I kind of dug into the soil and saw that it was rotting. You'll know root rot because it's mushy, it's pink, it's slimy, sometimes smelly. All I did was I just cut off the root where it was rotting. I dug the whole plant out of the soil, got rid of the part that was mushy and gross, and then the plant that was left, I stuck it into a glass of water until it grew new roots. And that took maybe a few months. It just depends on how much sun you have. The more sun, the better. But once it had about 2-3 inches worth of roots, I replanted it, and look, she's thriving. She literally had 1 leaf when I got her. Now she's got soon to be 5. You should get plants in your room. It will improve your oxygen quality, and I think it will bring you some joy while you're home. Okay, another example of plant damage. So my peace lily I mentioned, I've been out of town, and I know this plant bounces back quickly. So rather than asking someone to come in to water my plants, I'll be like, I'll just hope for the best. So I was gone for 10 days, and when I came back, this entire plant was wilted, like keeled over, hanging off the edge. But because it's a resilient plant, she actually made a full recovery and got all these leaves. But you can see at the bottom there's some leaves with a little bit of brown and yellow from that time they were neglected. But she's back. I mean, there's new growth. She's happy. There was a question, I think it was from Trisha, about what to do with brown leaves. So some leaves like this one, it looks pretty green on camera actually, but in real life it's a little more yellow. I might even just cut the whole thing off so that the plant can focus all of its energy on nursing the rest of itself. But if I maybe didn't have so many other leaves, I would keep it on for the sake of aesthetic and just trim off the brown part and just keep it looking healthy. But if you are trimming a leaf for aesthetics, don't cut all the way up to the green, because what will happen is in a few days, the edge of the green will just turn brown. So if you're cutting it off, cut where it's off completely dead, and maybe leave about 1 inch between where you cut, snipped, and the green part of the leaf. So if they have little holes in them, Trisha, I saw the photo that you sent. I would maybe just check to see if there's a bug, but 1 or 2 holes in it, it's not sick in any way. It just means that there is maybe a pest, but your plant looks really healthy. The best way to know if whether or not your plant is healthy is just to see if there's any growth. My other example is this, what is this called? It starts with the S. Syngonium? Yes. I don't really talk about this plant often. So this one is actually grown in a little ball of moss. It's called kokedama. It's a Japanese way of growing plants. It's really cool. Instead of being in a little pot, it's just moss. And there's living moss inside. It's a symbiotic relationship between the moss and the plant. And on the outside, it's dried, preserved moss. So this plant looks healthy now, but she actually was keeled over just like my peace lily. And I was really concerned because this plant is not as resilient as a peace lily. So if you look at the little bottom ones, can you see how there's a little bit of brown on the edge? That's just residual, that's just like leftover from the time that I was gone for 10 days. But I'm not worried about the plant because I see that there's already new leaves growing and they're opening up okay. They're turning the same shade of green. So I think that this one will be fine. I told you about how when I first moved here, I overwatered some of my plants and there was like a gnat problem. It wasn't huge, but all you need is 1 or 2 gnats to feel nasty. Nasty. This baby does not look good. When I bought it, this is a Dracaena. There's many varieties of Dracaena. This is one. I have a little baby Dracaena here too. So there's different varieties. This one was overwatered and I suspected it was the gnat problem. So I brought it outside. Happy to report no more gnats because the soil's really dry. But what I did by accident, I left it in a place that was shaded at the time I set it down. But what I didn't realize was in the morning, like early before I woke up, it was in full sun. So it got totally baked. And that is what all this brown damage is. You can see in some places I kind of trimmed it just so that I wouldn't be looking at so much brown. I know that this plant will make a recovery in time. It'll probably be really slow. But let me see if I can move this without getting dirt everywhere. Hold on. A good tip for your houseplants, by the way, some of my plants are in cute pots and ceramics and stuff. Some of them I just haven't had a chance to buy a pot, or, you know, it's kind of expensive. I'm very thrifty. I'm trying to find most of my pots at like a thrift store and such. To keep it from leaking onto my floor after I water it, I just have like I have an old takeout container. And most circular takeout containers kind of match up with the standard size pot. So in the middle, you see right there, there is a new growth. And that new growth is coming out totally green. There's no brown or damage on it. So I know that this plant's healthy, and that with time, when the new leaves come in, the old stuff I can just peel back, and we'll have a happy, healthy Dracaena. So question about this large plant next to me. This is a monstera, only one of the most popular desired plants of millennials. It's very lush and tropical looking. The split leaf is especially cool. I've read a few blogs about what causes the leaf to split or not, and it tends to be related to sunlight, according to what I've read. And just as it gets more mature, the leaves will split. If you look at the bottom, the leaves, I still even like it when they're not split. It looks like little hearts, quite cute. But up top, you have the larger mature leaves, and that is where they are split. Hey Monstera gang. Yeah, so if you are a subscriber or a frequent viewer, you can use your channel points to unlock the Monstera emote. I'm actually very excited about all of my emotes. I think they're pretty cute. If you're a subscriber, then you click the smiley face to the left, and you scroll down a bit, depending on how many people you're following or subscribed to. And you should see a DJ Lonnie Love section. If you aren't subscribed yet, you can still have access to the emotes like for free. It's just you get channel points from tuning in, participating in the chat. So click on that gold speaker on the left side, and that's where you can redeem channel points to unlock an emote or two. Oh, another plant of mine that had root rot was the ZZ plant, which I actually gave away. The ZZ plant, I knew it had root rot because I saw that there was new growths, like there were tons of new shoots. I had like 5 or 6 of them. So I'm like, okay, this plant's doing great. But then about 4 months went by and I saw no growth. They didn't bloom, they didn't grow any taller. So I brought the plant outside and just pulled the whole thing out and kind of inspected the roots, like I broke it apart. And I saw that a few of them had like specks of white. That meant it was diseased. When you have a diseased plant, like the root rot, like I just mentioned, you just want to cut that out and then put some fresh soil in it so that you're not spreading any of the bacteria that might be in it. Sometimes just being, in an urban environment and not having the chance to go to like a Home Depot as often, if I'm being like lazy or thrifty about it, I'll take soil from a plant that was previously overwatered and I'll just like lay it out flat, let it completely dry in full sun for a few days, and then I'll use it to repot something else. So I propagate all the time, but I'm propagating snake plants, spider plants, pothos, purple hearts. Well, ZZs, before you assume that it's root rot, they do grow at a glacial pace. So if it's still green and you don't see anything falling off, it might be okay. Like mine, it wasn't growing and I had a few leaves that were starting to look less perky. And so that's why I dug into the roots. Yo, snake plants, one of the few plants that produces oxygen at night. So are there any questions about where to place your plants in your house? Plants are just my hobby. I've had house plants like for the past decade, so I'm not like a certified expert. I put that disclaimer in my post. There are definitely people that know more than me, but I just wanted to help someone with a new collection, someone who's getting started. I know that a lot of us have been home for a while and will be home for longer. So plants and flowers make a house a home. Propagation means taking a cutting of a plant and placing it in water till it roots, so you have a new plant. So I'm constantly propagating pothos. Actually, let me get my mother pothos. Good bedroom plants. Okay, good bedroom plants. I will touch on that in just a sec. This is my mother pothos. I refer to her as that because she's one of the older ones. I've had her for a few years. I sometimes hang her, on like a curtain rod, or I'll place her on the top of a bookshelf and just let her drape the wall. I'm glad you like my green couch. I discussed it. I wanted like a deep dark green, like an emerald, but the only one they had felt almost more Christmassy, so I decided to go with this olive. I also love a royal blue, but I feel like everyone's got the freaking blue velvet couch. That's just millennials with the terrazzo, blue velvet couch, some pale pink somewhere, black and white, gold accents, marble, Anyways, and I mentioned using takeout containers to place under your pots to catch any water. If you're keeping your plants in one place, it's great to have something to catch excess water. But what I will often do with some of my larger plants is I'll bring them into my shower to water them, or bring them into the sink so that I can just water them thoroughly and let excess, collect in a place where I'm not mopping it. Oh, and then that reminds me, speaking of the shower, which is again a great place for your plants, I often like to collect a little bit of water from my shower every few days. So when you turn on your shower, it's not hot water right away. I'll just catch some of that water that would otherwise just be wasted. I'll save that, and I let my water sit in the watering can for a day or two before I water my plants, because it lets some of the fluoride and things that are in the water that are not harmful to humans, but for more delicate plants like a bromeliad or air plant, it's nice to let that stuff evaporate. Good bedroom plants was a question with low or very little sunlight. So snake plant, great for low light, top low light plant. ZZ plant, also great. Pretty strong correlation between the two. Plants that need low light, low water tend to grow slowly. So if you're looking for a plant that will vine really quickly and get really lush, you'll need something that gets a lot of sun and tends to need a little bit more maintenance, like more water. But something like a ZZ plant or a snake plant, you kind of just water them once every 2 weeks, 3 weeks. It's almost like the less attention you give them, the better. I know a lot of times when you're a new plant owner, you're like thinking about it all the time, and then you want to just water them every day, but that's not what it needs. It just needs space, 2 to 3 weeks before you water them. Thank you. I wouldn't organize a plant chat if I didn't have some information to share. High maintenance plants. Ooh, anything tropical. So if you go to a store and you see something that's got beautiful orange, red leaves, that is going to be a fussy plant. It's going to be high drama. If you're a beginner, maybe don't start there because you'll be disheartened. But once you've kept some of your green varieties alive, maybe venture. Just know that it may or may not survive, so don't spend a precious amount of money on it. Just start small. So I actually have a dress. The dress that's in the photo for the flyer is like the same exact shade of green. I debated wearing it because I thought it'd be kind of funny to camouflage, but I decided it was a little too much. It would just be a floating head. Yeah, wholesome plant chat. Ooh, carnivorous plants are definitely super high maintenance. I guess it's because they're kind of alive. Carnivorous plants are really fun. It's just they're fussy. Oh, fun fact, I'm not sure what their policy is now, but Home Depot and Lowe's both used to have a plant guarantee where if you held onto the receipt and if your plant died for whatever reason, you could come back within a year and they'd give you a new plant. The Home Depot one I know got exploited, got abused. So a few of my friends have told me that they've updated their policy. They're stricter about it. I don't know the exact rules around it because I haven't been in a while. But if it were up to me personally, I would just go with your local nursery if you can, to support a small business. And sometimes they do have better pricing. But if you are a beginner, it might be worth going to a big retailer if their policy is still good, just so that you can exchange something. Yeah, tropical plants are probably the hardest to grow indoors because your place is probably not that humid. Even if you're running a humidifier, it's hard to really emulate the amount of sun and moisture in the air. And if you're debating getting a humidifier, the Miro is a great one. This is just a tangent, but I used to not like humidifiers because they get grimy and you can't clean all the pieces. But shout out to my friend Anna, she's a new mom, does research on everything. She found a humidifier where you can literally wash every piece down to the motor. So something to keep in mind. Wow, you gave your plant a bottle of Voss water? I don't even drink Voss. Sometimes I get bottled water at gigs, and I feel like the weirdest kind of diva and then a particular, but not a diva because my request is not bottled water. I'm always like, may I just have like your filtered tap water if you have it, or I'll just drink straight up tap. No straw, no bottled water, because I'm just trying to reduce my plastic waste. And this glass, actually, it's from Vietnam. Oh, don't look at those nails, those are tragic. This glass is from Vietnam. It's made out of recycled glass. Do I ever fertilize my plants? Yes and no. Most houseplants, if they've come from a store or nursery, they have enough fertilizer in them to last probably a year or even 2 years, to be honest, because they go pretty heavy-handed with that fertilizer. It's not gross, but I feel like hair is a topic where people like get really a little squeamish. But if I trim my bangs or something, I will take my hair and stick it into the soil of some of my plants, because hair actually has a lot of nutrients in it, and as it decomposes, provides a lot of great nutrients to your plants. If you put a whole like long piece of hair, that takes a while to break down, but you're trimming your beard or your mustache, whatever, those little clippings you can just toss on top of your plant, and it's great for them. Eggshells are also great for your plants, but they take way longer to break down than hair. Also, they can have a little bit of a smell. So instead of actually breaking down the eggshells, so I've seen a lot of bloggers talk about eggshells, and one of my pet peeves is when people become experts because they Googled something, but they've never actually done it themselves. So they're like, oh yeah, save your eggshells, put it in your plants. And I'm like, do you know how long it takes eggshells to break down? So if you're trying to get the nutrients of your eggshells, a better way to get that to your plant, when you boil your eggs, take that water, let it cool completely, and then pour that into your plants. Otherwise, eggshells I would just throw into a compost for your outdoor plants, because they'll get more sun, more change in air and all of that, and so they'll break down a little faster than something in your house. Yes, used coffee grounds can be pretty helpful for plants too, but it just depends on the plant. Like, it is possible to put a little bit too much in, and the acidity of your coffee grounds could potentially damage your plant. So I love to use coffee grounds for compost that isn't going directly into my plant's pot, so it has a little bit more time to kind of break down and neutralize. Thank you so much for hanging with me. Appreciate your support. Hopefully you're learning some new gems. So propagation, sorry Trisha, you asked a question about propagating snake plant. So if it got mushy, it might have been that there was a little bit of bacteria or something on the plant, and so when it was in the water, it might have just created a breeding ground. So when I propagate my plants, that's what I brought this up for, I tended to top it off with water. Just as soon as it evaporates, I'll fill it up again so that there is more water so it can continue growing. But for some plants, like the ZZ plant and the spider plant, I've noticed the water gets murky a lot faster. So anytime you see murky water, you see kind of green algae, if it's a little whitish, dump that water out and put fresh water in. Even maybe rinse off the plant and lightly, clean off the roots, wash off the slime, because that slime potentially is a bacteria. So one of the reasons why I'm always propagating pothos, aka devil's ivy, is because it's just so resilient, and I love to give it to friends. It's just a really easy and satisfying plant because you can get so much growth quite quickly and easily. I'm literally, hold on, I'm gonna pull out the whole collection and let you see. I'm literally always propagating pothos. So we've got one, got two. In this one, I have a mix. I have the classic green one that you see all the time, and I have a neon pothos, courtesy of my friend Belinda. She got me that baby for my birthday last year. This one, I'm trying to make more of. This one's so beautiful, but it doesn't grow nearly as quick as the the darker green variety. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I don't put any fertilizer in my propagations. 10. All right, I have 10 of them. For inspo, you can use literally anything to propagate your plants. I like to have something that's a little bit shorter. This is a ton of water. I don't want to have to fill it up all the time to get the roots wet, but this was the last container I had. I like to use like old spice jars. You can use like pasta sauce jars too, but they're a little bit bigger. When you propagate, you want to use a smaller receptacle of water because that allows the water to potentially get warm as the sun comes out. If you use a large container and the water is cold, it's not bad, it's just going to take a little bit longer for you to see root growth. And the goal is, I mean, we all want things quicker, right? Yeah, fertilizing can burn the roots. Most houseplants propagate in water. So what that means is you take a cutting, you put it in water, and eventually over time you'll see some roots. So this one is a fresh cutting. See how there are no roots? I actually have a video about this on YouTube, so if you want to go back, you can watch it there. I'll probably upload this there too. This is live, so you can ask some questions. Hey, we've got an expert. See, we have a certified expert in the chat. Thanks for sharing. Yeah, you can get starters. You dip the end of a cutting and stick it in soil and it helps it grow quicker. But if you're just like recreational propagator like myself, water and a little bit of patience and sunshine. How much to cut and where to cut? There are these little nodes. Do we see those right here? There's one, it's already starting to root. You can feel the little bumps. See that dot right there? There's another one. Each of those is a node. With this plant, it's so hardy, you don't need any sort of rooting gel or rooting powder. You just cut right there, right below the node, and stick it into water. This plant, again, is so hardy, but some plants you want to cut fairly close to the node. So a lot of times when I'm cutting this, I'll just snip all of them and then I'll go back and I'll have a little pile of extra stem that I throw in the compost. This plant, this was made out of cuttings. 2 little containers. You can put more than one in at a time. You could cut one node to like 2 or 3, 4 leaves, but each node is a chance at another root. So I like to do 1 leaf per node. We talked about the dumb cane earlier and how I saved it when it was sick. Each of these little bumps, you can cut anywhere on there and stick it in water and it will grow. Generally, it helps to have, a nice healthy leaf. You want a fairly developed leaf so that it can photosynthesize. If you have a baby leaf, even if it is like a pothos or something, it's just a little bit harder for it to root. Snake plant, you can cut anywhere on the stem. Just remember which side's the top versus bottom. There's no node to look for. It's just the whole thing itself will root. It roots fairly slowly, like I mentioned. It's a slower growing plant, but it's fairly hardy. Christine had a little rubber tree. You can propagate that same way you do all these other ones. Just snip it, stick it in water, give it light, fresh water, some nice warmth, and you'll have yourself a new plant. Oh, thank you so much for tuning in for my DJ sets, and I'm glad that someone who's an expert thinks that I'm doing all right. I appreciate that. Well, a friend of mine had sent a picture of a dying jasmine plant, and my answer to fixing her plant or nursing her plant back to health is kind of relevant to most house plants. So she had repotted it and she was concerned because it was still not doing that well. Like the leaves were browning, they looked really dry, so she wasn't sure if it was getting enough water. And then she sent me a picture of where her plant was at. And what I suspect is maybe the plant's not getting enough sunshine because it was kind of behind other plants. And jasmine tends to be a plant that does really well outside in full sun in Southern California. So to be inside potted is already kind of tough. And then to not have full sun in a New York City apartment, like that's a challenge. So my suggestion to her was to find a slightly sunnier place if that existed, and then to also cut back the plant. With some plants, once they get really long, if the soil root to leaf vine ratio is starting to get off balance, it will get harder and harder for the plant to grow. So some of my plants, I like to trim them back just to keep them nice and bushy and healthy. And an example of that is my little neon one again. So this plant, because the pot is so tiny, it could vine, and it has, but I noticed it kind of struggles when it gets a little longer. So anytime it starts to vine, I'll snip and I'll propagate it so I can make a new plant and keep this one nice and bushy, and lush. Pinstripe calathea. Ooh, so with root rot, I would cut off the root rot, and if there's still some healthy roots, stick it back into the pot. If the whole root system is sick, then I would propagate it. So just look into propagation tips for that plant, but it generally is the same as what I've just been talking about, which is sticking it into water, cleaning out the water anytime it's murky, keeping it in bright light if possible, and a slightly warmer area of your home. Some plants, as they grow over time, they can become root bound, and what that means is that there's just not enough room for the roots. So there's a couple ways to address that. Repotting is generally what you'll hear, which means taking it and putting it in a larger, slightly larger pot, like an inch larger or so, with fresh soil. For some plants, if you really just are stuck on that pot size, you could separate the plant and just have fewer plants in the repotting so that there's more room for it to kind of continue growing. You can also trim off some of the excess length. You only need to have maybe a few inches worth of roots to have a fairly healthy plant. But some plants will go through a little bit of trauma, so don't be surprised when you repot if it's a little bit wilty here and there, but generally they should recover. We had a question about how much I paid for my plants. Let's see. This one here, this Dracaena was, I think, about 3 feet when I first bought her, and she had 3 different stems of different heights, and she was $30. And something of the same height for a fiddle leaf fig tends to be like $40 to $50. Fiddle leaf figs, now that they're so popular, I've seen them at Costco. Home Depot also actually has had really great deals on fiddle leaf figs, and you can order them to be delivered because a few of my friends have done that. They were so cheap I debated getting them, but I just know in this apartment in particular I don't get enough sun. It's a picky plant. They do great, and then once they're sick, it's a lot of work. My pothos, so pothos tend to be pretty affordable because they're so easy to grow. Like I just showed you all those cuttings of mine that rooted really well. But this one, I believe it's like 10 or 15. And I think because plants are getting trendier and maybe supply demand, I don't know, but I feel like plant prices everywhere, including Home Depot, have kind of all crept up a little bit. Some smaller places like Mikey's in Hollywood, I feel like their prices have still stayed fairly affordable. If you're in Chicago, Adam & Sons in Humboldt Park is like my favorite, and they're really great and affordable as well. And super informative. They love to answer questions about plants. Ask for Vega at Adam & Sons. Monsteras, because again, just trendy, high demand plant, pricing can vary. This one, I paid under $20 for it, which was a steal because I've seen ones like this go for $30, and she's just grown into a lush baby, lush little lady. Very low light except a few spots at your home. If you have very low light, I would try a ZZ plant or a snake plant and see how those work out for you. Maybe get like a small one. They have little itty bitty, like I think they're like 4-inch pots, and those are usually $5 or less. So that might be a place to start to kind of test the waters and see if you have any luck there. It's amazing, a 10-inch fiddle leaf fig for $20. So when they're talking about the dimensions of a pot, that just means like the width. Have you had plants go into hibernation in the winter? Most of my plants are just kind of basic house plants, so I don't know that I've noticed a hibernation. I just noticed maybe faster growth in the summer. So maybe what I think is a regular period is its hibernation, but I haven't seen noticeable change. It's just kind of generally green, healthy, just grows a little bit faster when it's warm. Yeah, lighting can help. It's not a perfect substitute. So a lot of times when you Google lighting for plants, you'll come across like kits for growing weed, and That reminds me, when I moved into this apartment, on the lease it specifically said that you can't have an excessive amount of indoor plants. And I was like, excuse me, define excessive. Like, is this excessive? But I realized that clause was in there just to keep stoners from growing a freaking weed farm. What's a good place for your bonsai? Generally, bonsai does well in a well-lit place. Some are a little hardier than others. Maybe an expert in the chat feels otherwise. It can handle direct sun, but because they're smaller and a little bit more delicate than like a larger plant. So just keep in mind, the smaller plant is the more fragile everything is, right? Smaller root system, more fragile ecosystem. I would like to leave it in a place that gets tons of light, but is still shaded so that it won't ever get burnt or just like cooked to a crisp. Let me look up this plant of yours, a zebra plant. Oh, cute. I've seen the zebra plant. I haven't had one myself, so I don't have hands-on experience, unfortunately. But because it's such a beautiful looking plant, I suspect that it needs a high amount of light, because a lot of your really colorful patterned plants, those are ones that grow in tropical environments. And that just means they unfortunately need more from us. They need more sun, more humidity. Oh, I also have a potted palm. I believe it's an areca palm. Maybe pronouncing it wrong. So this palm, ooh, the pot is massive because at one point it was a very large palm. But the reason why she's so small and dainty is because in moving, again, accidentally didn't realize this spot was so sunny. Ooh, you see, this is so heavy, so large. So I burnt some of the larger leaves, but I know that she's gonna come back to life because we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 new little leaves coming in, so I think she'll make it. Oh, a great place to look for pots will be like your thrift store, obviously, because they can be affordable, but as houseplants get trendier, inventory does run low. So TJ Maxx, Home Goods, Marshalls, they have caught on to the plant trend, and they are there for you with fairly affordable ones. Small ones will be like these, the size will be under $10. Larger one like that palm that I showed you will be maybe $25 and above. Oh, I've been there in Gardena. There's this place called Pot Manufacturing Company or something like that. It's near the 110 freeway. Their regular pots are a little bit pricey, but they have a section of as-is goods that are fairly affordable, and the guys there are pretty nice. If you're buying a bunch or they get to know you, they'll sometimes just give you arbitrary discounts on your purchase. Worth checking out, like if you're in the area, don't go out of your way, but something to maybe make a mental note of if you're in LA. Yes, Burlington, formerly, I still call it Burlington Coat Factory because that's how I remember it from the 90s. But yes, I've actually gone there and picked up some cute home decor as well. I feel like it's like TJ Maxx, Home Goods pricing, Marshalls, one category, Ross, and then Burlington Coat Factory. Some of the items are kind of struggles. You gotta inspect a little bit, but there are some gems to be found. Yes, you can buy cheap pots and decorate them to your style. So if you're dealing with little baby plants, like how many inches is this? Like 4? There are tons of these at the 99-cent store. That's a great place to get little tiny starters. And then they have slightly larger ones for $3 to $5. Terracotta pots, ones that are made of porous material, are great because if you're a beginner or maybe tend to overwater your plants, things made of clay and that nature will kind of absorb the excess water and your plant will stay nice and healthy instead of being overwatered. Some of the pretty pots, you know, you're toying with danger a little bit. Like this one I love, it's a green pot with a little bit of black splattering. Living on the edge. I am not growing any edible plants just because I don't want to deal with any pest, and maybe this will change because I'm just going to be home for the next few months, but in the past I traveled very aggressively for work. I would go between LA and Chicago a lot, sometimes San Francisco, and just wherever my gigs took me, so it wasn't really ideal for edible plant parenthood. You have a palm that has a few yellow leaves. Is that plant getting enough light, do you think? Because oftentimes a sign of yellow is either not enough light. If you notice a consistent yellow, it's not enough light. If it's 1 or 2 yellow leaves, then it might be that it's not getting enough water. So deadheading is removing dead leaves and flowers. Yes, okay, so I didn't even know what that was called, but I will often check on my plants, and if there's a struggling leaf or so, I'll cut it off so that it can focus its energy on the remaining healthy leaves. So I've gone over the basics of plant care, propagation, tending to sick plants. Are there any other questions before we end this stream? I feel like we had a solid hour of plant chat. I know you've got a Wednesday to get back to. I might do another plant chat, sometime from now. I feel like I covered all the material that I've got, but I might do maybe quick mini workshops in the future where I take people's submissions and put photos and videos of what they gave me up on the screen. I tried to do that today, but unfortunately wasn't having the greatest of luck, but we're learning together. Glad to hear you enjoyed my DJ set. Appreciate that. That's my bread and butter. This plant chat is a tangent and per request of the chat. I do have succulents. They're outside. They're kind of dusty from being outside, so I decided against bringing them in because I want to just focus more on indoor plants, just knowing that most of us are unfortunately indoors without the luxury of outdoor space. Oh, this one, the little syngonium. I never say it out loud, so I might have messed this up. This one, yeah, these are my little Japanese babies growing in moss balls. You can make these yourself. You can just Google it, but it's putting moss around moss and like dirt around the roots of the plant and then wrapping it in preserved moss. And there's actually a little bit of fishing wire, clear fishing wire, holding it all together. It's a whole process. It's easy, just messy. So maybe something that you do like in your bathtub where you can rinse everything off easily. Nice balls. I saw that coming. All right, well, thank you guys so much for hanging out. I know sound was like split left versus right, and I was just talking about plants for an hour, but I really appreciate your company. I hope you learned something new. Hope you feel excited to nurse your plant babies, maybe make some new ones. Thank you. I had fun knowing that you enjoyed yourselves. I think I have more fun DJing because I can jam out to the music. This, I'm just speaking into the void and hoping for the best. But I'm glad to know that you enjoyed it. It makes it worth it to me. I'm glad you learned something. And like I said, there's a lot of easy houseplants, so don't be intimidated. You can buy little ones like about this size for $5 just to get started. And if you feel yourself, getting adventurous, then you can move on to larger plants. If you kill a small one, don't necessarily blame yourself. Just remember, smaller plants have smaller roots, so they're a little more sensitive. I'm just trying to think of budget-friendly ways to get started. And you can also get cuttings from friends. So if you have a friend that's got a lush pothos, actually, I'm gonna open this up. If any of you live in LA, drop me a line when I'm running an errand, grocery store or something. If we're not too far apart, maybe I can find a way to drop off some cuttings for you, because I would gladly share this pothos mama with any of you. Plants make a house a home. Oh, aloe vera are an easy plant. Thank you for that reminder. Low maintenance, kind of like succulents, just give them some light, sun. You don't have to water them that often. And if you burn yourself in the kitchen, got some nice aloe. No one's getting sunburned because we're not going outside. I actually do think some people mail cuttings through the mail, and I know our post office could use some support right now because for some reason, half of our government is set on dismantling it. Maybe I can look into how to mail cuttings, and if it's not too hard, I can send some out too. Ooh, I love that. So helpful advice that she heard was every home has a different microenvironment. So your home may be the best environment for one plant, but the most hospitable to others. Don't be discouraged if you can't grow a certain type of plant. Definitely. I've had peace lilies thrive in most apartments, but there's been one apartment of mine that was so sunny and dry that my peace lily like died. If I didn't water it every 2 days, it would be toast. So like I kind of mentioned throughout when I talked about watering of your plants, there's a lot of varieties. Don't get discouraged. It's not like, yeah, there are people that have green thumbs, but it's all kind of trial and error for all of us. So there's a learning curve for everyone, just like cooking. Yes, you can regrow green onions. I do that all the time. Green onions, spring onions, whatever you call them, that you buy for your food. Snip off the top, stick the white part with the roots in a cup of water, and you'll have yourself a new plant within a few days, and they shoot up just like crazy. The only thing is with time, without soil, they start to lose flavor, but I mean, you'll have a plant for like a few weeks. The inside, as it grows, sometimes seems a little slimy, but it's fine. It's just a green onion. It's safe to eat. The green onion tip actually just reminded me, while we're on the topic of just like domestic things, if you ever have celery get, just really soft, stick it in water, and it's like vegetable Viagra. It is like healthy again. Same with carrots or any sort of root vegetable like a radish or daikon. Submerge it in water and it will be a like healthy piece of vegetable again. You could also just submerge it in water the moment you get it. So with celery, like if there's the root that's holding it together, you just need like an inch of water to make the produce last longer. But if you bought pre-cut celery, or maybe the celery is too tall to stick into your fridge upright, you can cut it into little sticks and put it in a Tupperware or cup of water, submerged on both ends so it doesn't dry out, and it will last a while. Your broccolini, you can stick it in water. Parsley and cilantro also, if you stick them in water, will make them last a little longer. You just might have to snip off the bottom a little bit because the stems are so fragile that they might have been dried out or squished in transit. So snipping them the way that you trim the bottom of flowers like every few days or weeks will help make your herbs last a little longer. All right, well, thank you so much for your time. This was really fun. I hope to see you tomorrow and later this week. I'll be back with my regular scheduled programming of themed DJ sets starting at 6 p.m. Pacific Coast. I feel it's like PST and then EST. It's not really fun to say, but 6 p.m. out of LA, 9 p.m. if you're on the East Coast, 8 p.m. if you're tuning in from the Mid Coast. And remember, singles night, Saturday, please invite your friends that are nice, that are great, that could use some company. It's just gonna be a fun thing. It's like no pressure. I just want people to have an excuse to dress up and feel cute and sexy, Thank you all. Take care. Have a good night.